AI is shaping the future of every industry. Are you ready to lead the way? At Northeastern University, our AI programs go beyond theory. With hands-on learning, cutting-edge research, and a focus
Thanks, everyone. My name is Shauna Fraser. I'll be moderating tonight. I'm a senior director. I work for innovation planning and development under the Chancellor's Office. We are so thrilled to have everyone here tonight. We, especially after our new partnership that was launched with Anthropic, we have two Claude representatives with us today, Ali and Shannon, and we have Prashant Mittal here, our presenter. So I would love to start with a brief intro, Prashant, um, and then I'll just share a couple little rules of engagement for tonight. So Prashant will break every now and then, and we'll take Q&A kind of periodically through this session. Please use the Q&A feature or the chat, either one, but if you could use the raise hand function in conjunction with any questions you ask, we will we will reach the questions that way. So in order, I will hand it over to Prashant. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Shauna. Just a quick question for you. Should I start sharing my screen?
Please.
Okay, absolutely. And let me go to the presentation mode. Could somebody confirm? Now I cannot see anybody. Could somebody confirm if you see my screen and hear my voice?
We can see it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. My name is Prashant Mittal. I am based in Portland. I am a faculty director of College of Professional Studies at the Rue Institute in Portland, Maine. I'm a faculty of analytics, data science, and artificial intelligence. I've worked for Rue Institute for the last 2 years. Very excited to be here. My topic is primarily around prompting for better results for research. And I will spend a few minutes talking about what I mean by research. How is it different from just search? I also want to make a quick pitch to one of my courses on Coursera. It's called Practical AI for Professionals. It's a wonderful, awesome course. Please check it out. And beyond that, let me just start by saying that most individuals I meet, who I speak to about artificial intelligence, there is a perception that AI means one of these three, or maybe Google Gemini or something else. But that may not be the true meaning of AI, which is a tool. From a user's point of view, there are certain aspects of AI that we should be aware of to better utilize its abilities. So for me as a user and as a practitioner of AI and as a teacher of AI, things like what kinds of models behind the scenes run is very important to know, because once I know, then I can maximize their utility. The concept of prompt engineering, which is really the biggest focus of tonight's discussion. Another framework under prompt engineering called chain of thought that I will talk about today. Idea on multimodality, what that means. Not using just one LLM or chatbot, but taking advantage of multiple for the same need. is another skill which requires a bit of practice. And then lastly, the concept of context window, which is akin to saying short-term memory or working memory amongst human beings. So what role does that play while writing better prompts and getting better results from AI? So these are some of the things I will touch upon, but let me move on to the next slide. And to start with, I just want to clarify what I mean by search versus research. In the title of my talk, the word research shows up. And research can be of many different types. But when I say research, I'm specifically referring to literature review. And literature review means systematic review of scholarly work. And the reason why before the start of a serious academic research, lit review is done so that researchers can find out if there are any gaps, if there are any inconsistencies, if there are any opportunities for the research that they have in mind for the future. So lit review is a very rigorous, arduous process, which typically takes anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months. It's a very structured process. And with all the modern AI tools, it can speed up quite substantially. Now, search, on the other hand, is, in my opinion, quick, and it is more of a lookup of an existing fact in a short span of time. So very different things. Fortunately, the prompting rules or the heuristics that I will talk about today, many of them work on both search and research. So that's a good news. There are 3 or 4 research tools that I use quite regularly, and right off the bat, I wanted to introduce those to you. And I also want to acknowledge this wonderful collaboration with Anthropic that Northeastern University has gone in. It's been almost a week, I believe, that all of us have access to the pro version of Claude. And only 2 or 3 weeks ago, Claude added a great superpower to its abilities, which is to live web search, which has suddenly made Claude an amazing tool, more so than it already was. So when you look at these 4 tools that I've listed here, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and then another more formal research tool called Elicit, they all have different ways of providing results to lit review. ChatGPT calls it deep research. Perplexity also calls it deep research. Claude, I had to figure out what is the research tool in Claude, and my assumption is that it's called extended thinking. I may be wrong, but there are representatives from Claude who can correct me if I'm wrong. And extended thinking within Claude is very similar to what ChatGPT or Perplexity would do, where extended thinking cites websites and resources that it went through in a thorough literature review. Elicit, on the other hand, is a more proper, structured, actual scholarly literature review, where it goes through. So, by the way, it has access to over 200 million scholarly research papers from a portal called Semantic Scholar, where anything and everything that you can think of, which was published in the last few decades, is available. And Elicit, this portal, searches through all of those research papers, and it has a specific algorithm where it extracts the most relevant research papers and extracts information out of them to create a literature review for you. Now, the big drawback with Elicit, while it is extremely thorough, is that it is extremely time consuming. It takes the longest to finish the job. Now, in relative terms, if humans were doing the same amount of literature review, that amount of time that Elicit takes is nothing. it can still finish a job within less than an hour or sometimes slightly more than that. But in comparison to the other three tools, ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity, Elicit takes much longer to finish that research. So while it takes much longer, it is more thorough as well, and it is proper scientific lit review. The other three tools do not do as thorough of a research, at least as of today, and they have varying levels of thoroughness, which is how deep do they go in their research. Both ChatGPT and Claude provide citations, and these citations are most of the times not scientific citations. So they are not going to a resource like Semantic Scholar unless you specify. And they are mostly going to reliable resources such as Nature magazine or Time magazine or NCBI or NIH website or CDC website and so on. The modality of doing any of the research on these three tools is very conversational, similar to using a chat GPT or a chat bot, where you would pose a question, write a prompt, and then it would respond. ChatGPT has a specific way of responding where it has at least one follow-up with you. So you pose a question to it, a research-based question, and it follows up with a question back to you, where it clarifies certain priorities for you, which is, do you want a formal or informal research? Do you want it to be academic? And so on. Claude and Perplexity do not have that follow-up set of questions. And with ChatGPT, it could be multi-step. It may not just stop with one follow-up. It may ask you few more if your responses were not clear. So at this stage, I just want to give you a very quick idea of what type of research results these three tools produce before we get into how to get those through proper prompting. So I will show you examples of the same research, same exact prompt given to these three tools and what they produced. So let's start with Claude. So this is the prompt, and I would let you read it for maybe 15 seconds before I get into the style of the output. So notice that my prompt is very, very specific. It's very targeted. It is giving direct instructions to the chatbot, Claude, and it is asking very specific things from it. So the nature of the output that Claude produces is it breaks down the initial prompt into various priorities, and it responds to each priority separately. Interestingly, one pattern I noticed was that for each priority, it gives up to only 10 citations. So if I click on this, these are the portals, these are the websites it extracted information on. Similarly, if I go down, and here it's talking about detection methods, again, it gives only 10 resources or 10 citations. Now, these are not scientific citations, just want to be clear about it. And it does that again. But the idea is that it gives a very thorough report in response to that original prompt, breaking it down into various steps and giving 10 citations of the sources at each step. So that's Claude. Let's compare it with ChatGPT. So same exact prompt. And as I said earlier, ChatGPT has a tendency of asking follow-up questions. And out of all of the research questions I've given ChatGPT, it always asks me, or it always asks me 4 follow-up questions. So here, for example, it's asking about the technical depth, which is, should it be academic level or general overview? It is asking about whether I prioritize case studies as response. It is asking about timeline and then format. So this is actually reverse engineering for me while I'm getting these results on what kind of prompt should I write. Because ChatGPT prioritizes these things. So wouldn't that be nice if I included these priorities as part of my prompt later on so that it doesn't have to ask me follow-up questions in depth? So that's just a clue on how to train ourselves or how to train yourself according to the style that a particular chatbot likes. So I gave the responses back, and then it went on to work. It took around 15 minutes, as you can see, which is not nothing compared to how speedy some of these chatbots are. And it gave a very thorough response, full of all of the citations embedded within the response at various places. You can download it, you can send it to a PDF file or wherever, but it's a very thorough work of lit review. So that's ChatGPT. Let's look at Perplexity now. Same exact prompt. Perplexity breaks it down into various tasks, like what was the thinking, what were the steps it took to come up with the response. Now, from a very biased opinion of mine, the quality of the report was the lowest from Perplexity. Partly because it's not very long, it's not very comprehensive. Second, the resources it went through are not, I would say, like, for example, Red Hat and Turing and LinkedIn. I mean, these are not, I would not call them the most reliable resources. So let me go back to my slides, and I see a couple of hands raised up. So maybe this is a good time to take a pause and take some questions.
Sure, Prashant. Let's see. Patricia, you have your hand up. Patricia, are you able to come off mute?
Yes, there we go. Sorry about that. So,
okay.
We haven't got to elicit yet, but my question was, does elicit also include books? You've talked about a lot of articles, in many scholarly fields, scholarship is, the book form is the standard. And, how about seminal works published before the past 3 decades or original sources? Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I am somewhat relatively new to Elicit. I've been using it probably for the last month and a half only, but I've done enough amount of experimentation with Elicit. My observation is that, and it's a fact, which is that it has access to only Semantic Scholar and nothing else. When I say only Semantic Scholar, it sounds like it must be a very limited amount of resource. Semantic Scholar portal itself has 200 million plus research papers. And whatever Semantic Scholar holds is what Elicit accesses. Now, if Semantic Scholar does not have, let's say, a paper that was written in 1930s, then Elicit has no way of accessing it. As a user, you can prioritize timing, which is, do you care for more contemporary research papers? You have a whole list of sorting abilities, or I should say filtering abilities, when you're putting Elicit to work.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Timothy. Timothy, are you here with us? You able to come off mute?
I'm right here.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, please, I wanted to ask, is there a way we could get a video recording of this lecture? I mean, I couldn't get all the details of the lecture. I just hope that we get recorded videos of this lecture,
yes.
so we can
Yes.
get time to go through it, the findings ourselves. Thank you.
Yes, it will be recorded and posted on the AI in Action website tomorrow by noon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for asking. David.
Yeah, I had a question in the Q&A about Northeastern Library's licensed site last year. How does site compare to Elicit?
Beats me. I do not know. That's a great question. And that would be something I would look into tomorrow, and maybe I can get back to you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, perfect. We had another one in the Q&A from Yan. To which extent can we trust research results generated by LLMs?
You should not. I think the short and sweet answer to that is you should not, which is that LLMs are assistants, AI assistants. They are not us. And they are great assistants, which means they are, for the most part, very intelligent in human sense. They are extremely helpful, they're extremely fast, and they are very thorough. But ultimately, they are not doing our job. They are helping us. So trust is something that I have struggled with quite a bit, because the moment I have become complacent with any of these chatbots, there have been moments where I regretted trusting them fully. So I am constantly reminding myself of the fallibility of these chatbots, that during critical moments they can actually hallucinate, they can be biased at times. So out of habit, I always try to question the results I get back from any of these chatbots.
Okay, thank you. We seem to have gone through all of the questions so far. I think we can move on and take questions a little later.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yeah, lots of very knowledgeable people here on looks like Elicit, so maybe we can talk about that at the end.
Sure, absolutely. So let me move on to the next slide from research tools to this very basic question of why this presentation is even needed. Why does prompting matter? So there is a philosophical side to it, which is very important for the listeners to hear, simply because by the way, there are two ways of prompting. One is to follow several frameworks that you can find online. There are lots of articles, whether on LinkedIn or otherwise, where people talk about these acronyms, like something like RISE, or there are very many other frameworks for prompting. That's one way of going about it, which is to follow what others have been doing. A better way, I believe, is to understand why certain frameworks work for prompting and why and what type of language works for prompting. So when I look at prompting, to me, it is communication with a chatbot. And when I think of the word communication, what comes to mind is efficiency. The sole purpose of good communication, let's say between two human beings, is to reduce translation. Think of speaking to a physicist, and if you don't speak physics or physical matters, there would be a constant translation between you and the expert. Think of a sports commentator. If they don't show the energy and the right lingo for their listeners would lose them. So in my opinion, the primary purpose of communication is to reduce translation, is to become efficient, and to reduce errors and misunderstanding. That's really what prompting is. The tricky part with chatbot prompting is this, that we sometimes have a tendency of thinking this conversation with the chatbot as if we are communicating with a human being. And that happens because we are using natural language. Natural language means human language. So one way I am training myself to not forget that I'm communicating with a machine and not with a human being is to remind myself of what it took me to learn programming languages. So I program in 7 different languages. And it takes a lot of effort to skill up in any of the programming languages. You learn the heuristics, you learn the syntax, you learn the grammar of the language, and then you make mistakes and you get better at it. The tricky part with chatbots is that we are speaking with a chatbot or communicating with the chatbot in our language. So sometimes we have a tendency of thinking that that is the language the chatbot speaks as well. The reality is slightly different. So just keep that part in mind when you are learning to prompt with a chatbot, that it has certain values, it has certain priorities, and we should know what it values, what it does with our prompt, and why certain prompts provide better results than others. So for that, in order to understand models' language values, we should also spend maybe 1 or 2 minutes on understanding on what the model went through behind the scenes in order to better communicate with the model. So training of a model, whether you're looking at a Claude model or you're looking at Perplexity or ChatGPT or any others, typically is a very expensive process. It's a very lengthy process. Typically, it takes 3 to 4 months to train a base model, and it costs tens of millions of dollars. And what happens during that stage is a continuous computing of, let's say, training from all of the internet. I'm using it very loosely, but massive amount of corpus of documents are fed that they go through this transformers framework where the base model learns to generate the next word in a sentence in a very smart way. So it's very context aware, and it knows what should be the next word in a sentence. Now, when I say what should be the next word in a sentence, it sounds very childish. It sounds very juvenile. The reality is that that's really the mechanism where it only generates one word, but it does it at such a fast pace that it can create a paragraph with the same mechanism, or a long document with the same mechanism without making very many mistakes. So when the base model is completed, which is very costly process and lengthy process, the model is ready to write and write intelligently. At that stage, it has not learned human values, what is important to us. And at that stage, it goes to the second stage of training, something known as reinforcement learning with human feedback. Now, the word reinforcement is not accidental. It is truly, in psychological way, positive reinforcement. So think of it this way, and trust me, I'll connect all of these and I'll tell you why this is important to know for better prompting. So during reinforcement learning, the model has something called a reward model, which means the model is rewarded every time it does the right thing based on human feedback. It also goes through role-based training. So again, this is the second phase of training where the model goes through millions of examples where it plays a specific role. So what are those roles? Something like, you are a helpful assistant, do this. You are an empathetic counselor, do this. Educational, you are a high school teacher, do this, and so on. So for each of these examples that I've written, which are specific roles on which each chatbot is trained, chatbot goes through millions of examples. And every time it does the right thing that we deem as the right behavior, the reward is given. And when it does not do the right thing, a reward is taken out. So there is this reward accounting happening where when the model does the right thing based on our feedback, it is rewarded, otherwise it is not. So in psychological terms, psychologists would call it behavior modification, that the model is learning to do the right thing and it is rewarded every time it does the right thing. So as a user, what I learned from this specific trait of training is that these models are really good at role play. Now, when I'm prompting, if I do not specify a specific role to play, then the model falls back to this default role. So for example, I write a prompt where I do not specify play this specific role. Behind the scenes, it would say, I am a helpful assistant. And it would go back to the training it did when it was a helpful assistant during reinforcement learning, which were millions of examples. But what if my need for the prompt is around it being a high school teacher, where I should have specified asked it to be a high school teacher so that it can answer properly to my needs. If I had done that, I would definitely receive better results. So this is something to keep in mind, that almost all of the chatbots, at least the ones that I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, when they go through reinforcement learning, they go through millions of examples of various roles. There are various estimations out there, 25 roles, some say 50 roles, some say 1,000 roles, but there are like role-based training is a key aspect of most of these chatbots, and we should know that fact so that we can write the right prompt so that it responds that way. Okay, this is another good time to take a quick pause and see if anybody has any questions for me.
Okay, one question was, what does RLHF stand for? It was on your previous slide.
Yeah, so this is reinforcement learning with human feedback.
Great. All right. Does this type of preconditioning of the model help in altering the responses and eliminating false information from the responses?
So there are two questions in this one question. The false information from the responses are taken care of by a very popular technique called RAG. I'm forgetting the full form of that acronym, but essentially the idea is that when there is contextual ambiguity in your prompt, suppose the world has not agreed upon a certain fact, and based on the geography or the type of people you ask, people may have different opinions, such as a topic such as climate change. The model is very much aware of the sensitivity of the consequences or repercussions of its response. And in those cases, the model is also context aware, which is what do you value? And based on a combination of those and the sensitivity of the question, it goes through a step-by-step fact check through this technique called RAG. And RAG so far has been very successful. And there are other frameworks also similar to RAG, where before just spitting out answers to your question, it confirms and it makes sure that to the best of its ability, it has reference back with the facts and it is giving you the most accurate information.
Great, thank you. Patricia, I'm going to take one more just from the chat and then I'll come to you. What do you mean by reward? Where is the reward coming from? This was upvoted quite a few times.
Sure. So I don't want to get into the weeds here because the moment I get into the reward model, I'm talking about machine learning. So in machine learning or in reinforcement learning of a training model, there is a way of creating a reward model, which essentially keeps an account of how many times the model is responding accurately. And it's not as simple as the number of times the answer was accurate. It is more nuanced than that. But think of it as an accountant during the training phase, which is keeping track of models' responses, whether they are in line with our values, with what we deem as human beings an accurate answer or not. And it rewards, which means it gives it a positive reward for giving the right answer and negative reward for not giving the right answer. Now, from model's perspective, the model's objective is to maximize that reward. In other words, model would keep tweaking its behavior as long as the reward is going up. If the reward goes down, it tweaks its behavior in a different way.
Awesome. Thank you. Patricia.
Yes. So who designs the training models? I'm particularly the issue of the diversity of software developers of the industry is not great. And so how does one ensure that the models are aware of the diversity of people, race, of humanity, really, race, ethnicity, culture, etc. Because the model is based on does reflect a certain values of designers.
Patricia, that's a great question, and I'll tell you my observation on what has happened, the evolution of chatbots in the last 2 years. The concern that you shared was a major concern in 2023. The very first chatbot was released in November of 2022. And very quickly, as all of us started using ChatGPT, which was released then, we realized that it was biased and it was hallucinating constantly. And it raised all kinds of kind of red alerts amongst users. And OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, took note of that. Now, after that, so many different companies, including our wonderful Anthropic, has come up. This concern around of the inherent potential bias that may be a reflection of us as a society in total, that they are making sure that the obvious mistakes, obvious biases do not manifest when we use these models. You can take my word on it, because I'm a power user of many of these models. I do not witness many of the obvious biases that we were witnessing in 2023 anymore.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. I think we're good to move on.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the next slide. And this was role-based training that I already talked about. Let me quickly talk about the concept of context window, which also helps while writing prompts. So context window is a phenomena that's similar to working memory or short-term memory in human beings. And short-term working memory means, or in computer language, you can think of it as RAM, random access memory. So context window for Claude is 200,000 tokens. A token is not exactly a word, but very similar to a word. So a token on average is 3/4 of a word. So if it says 200,000 tokens is the context window for Claude, what it means is approximately 150,000 words you can interact with during one session, during one chat session. After that, the chatbot would start either hallucinating or losing memory, or would start to forget important details of that conversation. The good news is that 150,000 tokens is such a massive number that most conversations do not last that long. So imagine I started a conversation with Claude, probing about the concept of LLM hallucination. So that was my main criteria, main topic of inquiry. And let's say I have lots and lots of back and forth, lots of probing questions, and we have exhausted. I've exhausted that context window of 150,000 words. What will happen next is whatever I asked as the very first thing is what Claude would start forgetting, which means the central theme of the conversation is what Claude would forget, which was hallucination of LLMs. And then it would start to repeat itself. Then it would start to make up answers. Like you would notice that the quality of the responses is going down. That is definitely the point to start a new session, start a new conversation. But as I said earlier, it is such a big number, such a massive number, that for most conversations, we don't reach that limit. It is important to know, though, that there is a limit to each session, each conversation. Now, if you are also providing documents, so for example, in Claude, you can add files and documents, whether they are PDF, Word, or images, they all count toward this context window. So if you supply a document that has, let's say, 50 pages and has, let's say, 50,000 tokens in it, those 50,000 tokens go toward the context window. So as a general rule, it's not unlimited amount of memory. It is fixed, it is large, and we should be aware of it when we interact with these chatbots. Now, what happens when we provide a prompt? Remember on one of the previous slides, I said that chatbots' language values may not be completely in line with what we value in our communication. So chatbots typically filter out unnecessary tokens within our prompts that do not add value to their understanding of what we are trying to ask. And this is my favorite example that I'm going to say. It's very controversial also. Not everybody likes it, but there is no reason we should be requesting anything to any of these chatbots. So something like, please provide blah, blah, blah details on something is not needed. Or saying thank you with a large exclamation sign is not needed. It does not care, and none of these chatbots care for our pleasantries, for our communication style. They have their own communication style, they have their own values, and I think we should focus on what they value so that we can improve the results. Another thing which may sound strange is that when we provide a prompt, they break the prompt down into words and what is called subwords. So for example, the word tokenization may not be taken as the whole word tokenization. Chatbot may break it down into 3 subwords, and it understands the meaning of those 3 subwords, even though they may not mean much to us. So for example, it may break down the word tokenization into token, IZ, and IN. Now, it is very difficult for us humans to understand that concept because that's not how we communicate. Tokenization, the word tokenization has a specific meaning to me, but it does not to a chatbot. So it breaks it down into how it was trained into subwords. And then it converts them into mathematics, also known as embeddings or vectors, and then does its magic behind the scenes and responds back. So here is an example of a poor prompt. And the prompt is, discuss the causes and consequences of climate change. It may make perfect sense to most of us that it's a very cogent, very clear prompt, very precise prompt where the need is to ask about consequences of climate change. We know what climate change is, and we have a certain opinion about climate change, and we are seeking chatbot's advice on that. It is a poor prompt, and later on in the next few slides, I'll make a case why this is a poor prompt. So hold on to that for a few minutes. So let's talk about what is a good prompt. There is a concept of direct instruction. Chatbots like direct instruction, and direct instructions are explicit, systematic, and efficient. And on top of it, if you add role play, then chatbots like it even more, which is staying on point on what the real need is of your inquiry. Asking that without any pleasantries is the right way to go. If we could also pre-translate it, which is knowing what kind of translation our prompt will go through. If we do it already, then that's even better. Then there is a concept of few short examples. And what that means is, if we have examples that we have in mind around which we want clarification or response back, then that is even better. So I will give an example of what a few short example is. Now, there are certain exceptions to direct instruction to a chatbot, which is that if your inquiry is exploratory, if you're trying to explore something, or if you're trying to understand how these chatbots reason, then direct instruction may not work because you may not want to restrict them to a certain pathway. In those cases where you are not clear on what exactly do you want, I think free flow exploration is a better way of going about it. Let me go through one more slide before taking any more questions. So there are these three quite famous frameworks for prompting. One is called chain of thought, or COT. One is called few shot prompting, and the other one is role-based prompting that I've already spoken about. So let's think about what chain of thought is. Chain of thought is emulated very much on how we break down processes when we are solving problems. So, for example, if I'm solving a mathematical problem, there is a set of steps I would go through to solve that mathematical problem. And it doesn't have to be a mathematical problem. It could be a logical problem, and which could have a set of steps. So chain of thought is a specific way under which most chatbots are trained. So if we make chain of thought part of our prompting, we are bound to get better results. The other one is few shot prompting. Few shot prompting is something like this, that I'm seeking from the chatbot a result on sentiment of a certain sentence. I want it to judge whether this specific paragraph or document or a sentence has positive, negative, or some other kind of sentiment. Then it is worthwhile giving it some examples of what I call positive, what I call negative, and so on. That's a few shot prompting, which is make some examples part of your prompt so that the model in real time learns from your priorities so that it responds back to what you prefer. Third one is role-based prompting, which I've already spoken about, which is give it a specific role because it was trained that way. And you will have a better shot at getting the result that you have in mind. Another good moment to take a pause, and then I will try to finish it before 6 o'clock.
Great. I actually am going to pop a little form in the chat. I would love for all of you to just take one moment to fill out our feedback form, and then as you're moving through that, please raise your hand and we can move through some more questions. So I'll give everyone about a minute to finish the form. We appreciate your feedback.
Shauna, while everyone is writing feedback, I think it would be worthwhile just going to show some specific examples in the remaining amount of time. And then if there is any time left, then I can take more questions, because there is something really interesting that I want to show to the audiences.
Wonderful. If you want to go ahead and start, or
okay, yeah,
that
let's
would
do
be
that.
great.
So next thing that I want to show is in the next few minutes is leave you with a tangible product, which is, yes, there are these heuristics, there are these rules that I talked about, how to improve prompting. And I have a few more slides where I've shown examples of what a good prompt is. But then if all of this was confusing and too much, then let me show you a clever way of using a chatbot to write the right prompt for you that you can feed back to the chatbot to get the right result. It's similar to asking a hiring manager to review your resume so that you can improve it and get the job. So it's a hack around chatbots. Let's start with ChatGPT very quickly. In ChatGPT, there is a GPT called Prompt Maker, which is fantastic, which is designed to actually write prompts for you based on your priority. So let's do an experiment here. So I wrote down this statement, and I'm giving it this statement around LLM hallucination. And I want it to write the right prompt for me so that I can get the best results from ChatGPT. So I would say improve this prompt for deep research. And I've given it this specific question: how is LLM hallucination defined, and what is the evidence that LLMs hallucinate? So that's my main inquiry. But I know for a fact that this is not the most optimal prompt if I give it directly to ChatGPT or to Claude. So I say improve this prompt and let's see what happens. So it immediately got to work, and it identified a few drawbacks or weaknesses in my prompt. It said that I have not given an identity or a role to ChatGPT. I have not given it clear objectives on what it should do, and I have not broken it down into a chain of thought, which is step-by-step structure. So then it updates the prompt for me, where it defines the role, defines clarity, breaks it down into structure, and it writes a very long prompt for me. So this whole thing is the prompt that this GPT deems is the right way to go about it. I can just copy, paste, and go back to ChatGPT and give it. So this is a clever hack where I can use ChatGPT to write the right prompt. The same thing can be done with Claude as well, which is I can ask it, use chain of thought framework to improve the following prompt. And it immediately went on to work and created a very detailed descriptive prompt for me that I can copy and paste and give it back for a more deep research through Claude. Okay, so it is 6:58. I should stop here and see if anybody has any questions.
Okay. Is the prompt maker available for the paid version of ChatGPT?
I believe it is available to anybody. I believe it is available for free version as well.
Okay, great. let's see. Okay, a lot of these, sorry, I'm back. Let me go to those people who are raising their hands. Juan.
Sorry, I was on mute. So has there been any research done about regional communication patterns in the US and impact on prompts or responses? I think of the fact that there's known variations, levels of directness. The Northeast tends to be much more direct than the South. Levels of use of pleasantries. So the South tends to use pleasantries more. So would there be a sort of something we should be checking for if you're from specific regions, if you know how you communicate, right? So there's almost a known handicap if pleasantries are sort of downvoted or lack of directness is downvoted.
I think you're making an awesome point here, and I absolutely agree with you. I mean, pleasantries are part of our makeup, our DNA. When we communicate, most of us like to use that. The point I was making earlier was, by the way, I'm not aware of the research done on that. These are the heuristics and rules of thumb that I keep picking up as I read more research papers. So the point I was making was that we have to specifically train ourselves when we communicate with chatbots. But speaking of research paper, I just want to take this opportunity of sharing one amazing research paper that came out of Anthropic almost 10 days ago. And it's called On the Biology of Large Language Model. I strongly encourage everybody to go through it, skim through it, do the TLDR, whatever works for you. You will learn a lot about the personality, the psychology, the biology of most of the large language models, specifically the haiku model that Claude uses.
Thank you so much, Prashant. There's one more, Julie.
Yes, hi, thank you. This was actually, I think, number 5 on that slide right before this, but I was going to ask if there was anything you suggest for kind of guarding against hallucinations, if there was anything specific to include in a prompt, or if that is more of just, hey, whatever it spits out, just, don't base your life savings on or something. Just wondering more about that.
I think the latter part is definitely a good advice. Do not put your life savings in that on anything, ever. The heuristics that I have created are multifold. If something is inconsequential, where I'm looking for something that is fact-based, is historic, where I know there are no opinions or alternative truths to it, I don't spend much time in cross-checking. It's very similar to, it's much more effective than Google search, in my honest opinion. Where the problem occurs where I am not sure what the right answer is, where I'm actually seeking knowledge, new knowledge, is where cross-checking, where checking the references is very much necessary. So the heuristic I have created is that in those circumstances, I start by asking it parts of that inquiry where I am confident I know the answer. So it is almost impossible for me to inquire about something where I don't know anything about it. So the parts that I'm aware of, I check with it, does it know what I know? In other words, does it know the universal facts around a certain inquiry? And if it gives me confidence, then I proceed with it cautiously. The other thing that I'm quite habitual of doing is not to rely on single chatbot. Like the very first example I gave was around LLM hallucination, where I gave the same inquiry to 3 different chatbots, and then I synthesized information from all of them. Almost always you would notice that there would be constants, and then there would be variables across the results from these chatbots. And that's really the most interesting part, to focus on the variables, which is what is Claude saying differently than what ChatGPT told me.
Wonderful. Do we have, let's see. Okay, if there's a form. So I want to just include a couple messages from our sponsor. There is a form in the communications that I just put in the chat. If there's a form, we would love to hear your thoughts about Claude. We are now in partnership with them, so we would love to hear a little bit more about your experience. If you have any questions about AI in action, there's an email there. Please email us about future programming. And there are more Claude 101 trainings happening at Northeastern over the month of April. So please check those out. Feel free to sign up. We're so grateful to have had your time, Prashant. It's always a delight, and we thank you, everyone who came to join in. Thank you to our Anthropic partners, Allie and Shannon, for answering questions in the chat, and we wish you all a wonderful night.
Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye. It's just my crew.
That was